Pointy End. I'm Keith Sutherland. Today my guest is Jon Anstey, Manager of Insight and Innovation at Livable Water. That's a pretty impressive title there, Jon.
Thanks very much, Keith. I made it up myself.
Well, only then. It can only work if you make it up yourself, but it does sound impressive. But anyway, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much.
Now, I watched and listened to an address you made at La Trobe University about the idea of serendipity. Can you explain to me what you really mean by that? Because I've Googled it, looked up the word, several meanings of it, but it was a topic that I wasn't expecting, but it was a brilliant topic, to be honest.
It's the water cooler discussion, Keith.
Okay.
It's where you are having a cup of water at the water cooler at the office or somewhere. You strike up a conversation with someone and it leads in unexpected directions. So serendipity itself, it's a beautiful word, isn't it? It actually means a combination of wisdom and luck. It comes from an ancient fairy tale where people were sort of travelling through life, finding out things they weren't really looking for. And I love that word because I lived in Sri Lanka for a while, which used to be called Serendip, and that's where the fairy tale was set. So I love these smaller places where you get to meet a lot of interesting people and get things done. Interesting,
the topic itself, because when I was going through doing a bit of research on serendipity, and it's very serendipitous, we're here today to talk about it.
It is indeed.
It's one of those sort of cliches, but when you think back and the occasions when someone comes into your life at the right time to talk about something, and it's quite amazing how that sort of happens. So is that how it got sort of, you started because there was that situation where two people, like minds, thought about something, were there at the right time? Is that how it sort of came about for you? Because it's not a topic that you would imagine people go and talk about.
Well, Steve Jobs, Keith, talked about joining the dots backwards. In other words, you do things in life which you don't really necessarily at the time understand the significance of, but you've got to leave yourself open to do that sort of thing. Steve Jobs said you can't join the dots looking forwards. And I think that's a really interesting, powerful insight. It's one that I certainly apply in my professional life. Also in my personal life, I try and keep an open mind when I'm meeting new people, because I find that really brings a lot of richness to life. Jobs talked about when he was a college dropout, dropping into a Japanese calligraphy class. He wasn't being assessed for it, he just dropped in for a look. And he made the observation after the fact that had he not dropped into the class, the Macintosh computer would never have had a whole range of different type faces or the range of fonts that it's got. So I think that's a really powerful insight.
So obviously Jobs you're a big fan of his, and you couldn't help but
Aren't
be.
we all?
Yeah, couldn't help but be. But
yeah.
Going back to Sri Lanka now, I looked through some stuff of yours, and you were involved, or you did some studies in Korea, you're United Nations in Geneva, Sri Lanka, United Nations, and Shell, the Netherlands. Now, you've travelled a lot. What takes you to all these different places in Sri Lanka? I want to come back to that because you can explain the situation, current situation, and there's still problems over there, of course, and the Tamil Tigers, and maybe we're not past all that yet, but everyone purports that we are. So come back to that one firstly, Sri Lanka.
I made a decision quite early on in adult life that I wanted to travel. So I suppose using a serendipitous approach left myself open to opportunities as they came along. I have only ever applied for one job out of the newspaper, and that was a job that I got with the United Nations in Geneva, where I stayed for 5 years, working on claims for environmental damage from the first Gulf War. I've also, after the Asian tsunami in 2004, spent a number of years in Sri Lanka working on post-tsunami reconstruction in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Also in Pakistan after the earthquake in the mid-2000s. So spent a lot of time on the, I suppose, international work, which I really love because, again, you meet all sorts of fascinating people and get to know different parts of the world, which I find deeply enriching. And then fast forwarding to a period in Utrecht in the Netherlands where I worked with Shell setting up international sustainability partnerships. That was, again, very much about understanding the way the international system works. And I see coming to live and work in Bendigo now as just a natural progression of all of that, because Bendigo, in my view, is really an international city, certainly has the capacity to be on the international stage, even more than it already is.
that sort of led me to the question that you've done all these things, United Nations and post, obviously, destruction in many of those countries you mentioned. Why Bendigo? Because Bendigo is the centre of the universe, as we know now, for you, now that you're here. But why Bendigo? Because you've done all these amazing things, whereas all those other places like Sri Lanka, Pakistan and all these other places, you were looking at reconstruction. Bendigo, obviously, working with Collivan, we had to reconstruct some of the pipes, but that's not the same thing as your past working history, of course.
Well, in some ways it is, Keith, I think, because we face major challenges in the region in terms of water. So I figured that if I, from a professional sense, spent time in Bendigo, in the region, working on water issues, then that would be really a continuation of the sort of policy work that I've done in the past on natural resources. So for me it was a great career opportunity, but at the end of the day I came back here to be with family, then got the job afterwards. That's the first time that has ever happened to me. It's worked out magnificently.
Okay, and Collivan, obviously that's where you work at the moment and your role is insight and innovation, and obviously the environment is very important. Bendigo, as we all know, was on its knees some years ago and without that pipe, and then I was told on the weekend that we basically have about 4 years water supply ahead of us, provided it doesn't rain anymore. Have we set ourselves up as being fairly self-sufficient water? I know we've got the recycled water, some great things, some great initiatives that have happened in Bendigo, but have we set ourselves up well enough for a prolonged drought?
We have, Keith, yes. We spent a lot of time, money and energy during the Millennium Drought getting ourselves set up for this, but of course it will be an ongoing challenge to make sure that we maintain and increase the level of resilience that we've got. The Goldfield Super Pipe has been a major investment. We are looking at other necessary investments down the track to continue that level of resilience that we've got. Another, then of course in life there are things like the groundwater issue that crop up to do with the rising groundwater in Bendigo as miners leave, and that has for the time being been a waste minimisation challenge to prevent discharges of groundwater into Bendigo Creek and other places around town, but ultimately it may become a resource maximisation opportunity. So in addition to the recycled water resources, an increasing focus on stormwater over the last few years, we've got a range of different supply options that we continue to look at on an ongoing basis. And we're also, I think it's true to say, very aware that people changed their water consumption behaviour in the last drought, so we're busy understanding the demand side, if you like, as well in terms of consumer behaviour, customer behaviour.
Okay. Ian Hart sat in that very seat. We talked about the groundwater problems and the issues with the mine and of course the pond that we've had out at Wellsford and things like this. So you see that there can be an advantage with some of that rising groundwater, and I see the Andrews government has given I think $1.5 million towards that, because from the central Deborah gold mine being one of the lowest points, all the water sort of drains to that area. So you see some advantages in the future that with some of that groundwater that we can utilise.
Well, certainly it's been a source of major community concern, the way we manage the mine water over the last decades, particularly in the last few years, which really led to a position being put to the state government a few years back, that this is indeed a wicked problem. It touches many different ministerial portfolios. So for the time being, the department is, the central government department is taking the lead on the matter. Coleman Water is assisting with that process, but it's really focused on minimising the potential, the risks to the community. But going forward, I expect that there will be, and there certainly is already, a focus on what we can do with that water, what the options are to actually use it as part of the supply mix.
Okay, and with new technologies, of course, a lot of things change, so that's a great thing. Coming back, I can recall at that speech that you gave at La Trobe Uni, basically you talked about livable cities and things like that, and you were fortunate, you came back to Bendigo to live in this wonderful livable city, and the council have been doing a great job the last 10 years promoting that, and we're arts and culture, we're leading the pack. We're leading the pack on lots of other things with education and transport. Explain that to me, how you see Bendigo as this livable city. What other things can we do to enhance the beauty and how people perceive Bendigo, because back 10 years ago when the drought was on, people didn't want to come here. Now everyone wants to come here for music and all the other things, and education, and the new health facility coming up with the hospital. So what's your perception of a livable city?
Well, our vision for the city, I mean the shared community vision, one that comes out of council, is Australia's most livable regional city. Certainly from a Colavan water perspective, our vision is water to live, grow and enjoy. That's a reasonably recent refreshing of the vision that the board has done. So we are all talking the same language across different levels of government. The federal government has just released in the last week a smart cities policy that's very much about the 30-minute city.
I noticed that one a bit different to our 10-minute city here.
Of course, we can go a lot better than that. We talk about the 10-minute city.
Yeah, and then of course Melbourne, Sydney, I think 30 minutes was probably a bit of an exaggeration. I would have thought an hour out there, but anyway.
That's right,
We won't worry about that, but at least
Yeah.
Malcolm Turnbull's talking about it, and that's innovation for the future, we hope.
That's right. And part of it is about density of development. That's certainly something that from a water servicing perspective is of great interest to us, also to other utility service providers. But you've got to balance that against amenity. So what we see in Bendigo, which is so fantastic, is all of the great assets that you've mentioned, ranging from the gallery, the Bendigo Gallery to
Alhambra.
Alhambra,
It's just
all of
incredible.
we could spend 5 minutes reeling off the list of things that are going on here. So water is fundamental to all of that. So our view of water is that it has a fundamental role to play in livability, and that's not just for this region. It's an Australia-wide body of work that we're doing through our national and Victorian peak bodies to understand what that contribution might be. Ultimately, Bendigo is a big finance, health and water town. Water because we aren't founded on a river or water body, unlike other regional and metropolitan cities. So ultimately it's a matter of finding out, discovering how best we can understand the role of water in livability here.
Okay. Bring it back to your role at Colavan. What other great initiatives are you working on? Because yours is obviously a very exciting role, and I'm not saying downplaying any of the other roles, but innovation, insight and all these sorts of things is a really impressive title. But it's more than that, because there must be lots of things that Colavan is working on. When I went through the executive, and you're part of that executive team, but you're doing some really positive things, and as you said before, looking to the future with water, and we can't take it for granted, and we are hopefully through that drought taking a different attitude and not wasting water like we did, but there's probably other initiatives under your banner, I guess.
We're thinking more broadly about some of the big initiatives that may be coming in our direction. For example, this really isn't on the front burner, Keith, but the inland train link that's being talked about to potentially join Melbourne to Brisbane is something potentially down the track of great interest, pardon the pun, of great interest to us as a community. The financing...
Sorry, can I just pull you
yes.
up? Is that going via Bendigo? Is that what you're
Well,
suggesting?
I think that's the question. That's one of the questions.
I know, they always
Bendigo,
talk Seymour, Shepparton side,
yes,
but
yeah.
Bendigo would
I know
be
the
wonderful.
Bendigo Business Council is doing some work on positioning us so that we're in the best possible place were that project to continue. I note that last night in the federal budget over $600 million was announced for that project, at least for pre-construction, very preliminary work to continue. Of course, it's a decades-long, multi-billion-dollar project, so very early days yet. But it's heartening to see us as a community thinking about some of those really big opportunities. The NBN is another one where we've had our degree of frustration, I suppose, but it's about how
it's a major issue in my head, and has been. Many people, we had Jason Clare on that seat about 6 weeks ago talking about it, and that's been something I've been really passionate about. I'm not very happy with the fibre to the node, but anyway, it's another political issue, but keep going, sorry.
Yes, so I suppose my job and the job of the team that I lead is to think about some of the opportunities that we have, both as in our own right as a utility service provider, but more generally how we can contribute to regional development. in looking at opportunity in a slightly different way. And certainly the new vision that we have of Water to Live, Grow and Enjoy creates a great space for that sort of thinking. Just as another example, we're presenting next week at a national conference on innovative financing for infrastructure projects. And I come back to the point that Bendigo is a big finance town. So what I'm really about is playing to our strengths in Bendigo and in the region, looking at finance, health and water in particular. I suppose at the moment you ask, what am I working on at the moment? Well, it's really understanding how we can best make some interlinkages among those different strengths that we have to get the most out of our opportunities.
And as you said, there's plenty of them here. Finally, yourself, you've travelled all over the world, Geneva and some magnificent places that we know of. What sustains you? What keeps you here? What do you do for entertainment? What do you do for recreation to keep a person that's travelled the world in downtown Bendigo now? That obviously you love being here. As you said, family brought you back here, but you love being here. But what sustains you with other things outside of work and the work that you do and the environment and everything else at Coliban?
Well, it's family and friends. This is the ancestral seat up here in central Victoria.
Well, that's good to hear.
Absolutely, and as you said, this is the best place in the whole world to be. I do a lot of sport. One of the things I love about this part of the world is it's just a world of opportunity for the great outdoors. And what I'd love to try and do through my, I suppose, work on various boards that I'm on and so on is encourage more people to be taking advantage of what we have here. When you and I grew up, we were, well, I'll speak personally, Keith, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I was always outside doing things. And I think that's something that we run the risk of losing. So I'm very keen to contribute through, I suppose, both my own personal activities as well as boards that I'm on health, arts, sport and the environment, one way or another, to get people outside doing things. Active and passive recreation is
and it's pretty
really
important
what
in Bendigo.
sustains me.
Very much so, when we've got an obese country, an obese city. So the outdoor environment is obviously good. And I have to make one comment here that I don't really like being in a lane up at the aquatic centre when you're swimming, because you go a lot faster than I do. So I try not to be in that lane because I'm left in your wake as you do those laps up and down.
It's just a whole string of personal worsts for me, Keith.
And me. Well, Jon, it's been great to talk to you on all the innovation, all the wonderful things that you've got in mind for Bendigo, and we're glad to see that your ancestral home is here in Bendigo, and we look forward to bigger and better things that you're doing at Coliban and for the community. So thank you for appearing on the Pointy End today.
Thanks very much.